Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Ready to jump into another fascinating corner of the world?
Always, especially when it's a market as dynamic as the one we're looking at today.
Absolutely. Today, we're going to be talking about the Turkish housing market.
Oh, interesting. I've seen a lot of headlines about that lately. Seems like everyone's trying to figure out what's going on over there.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of confusion out there, honestly.
hmm
Some headlines are saying it's a buyer's market. Others are saying, be cautious.
Right, right. So where do we even start with all of that?
Well, I thought a good place to start would be this article I found from a major Turkish news outlet. They actually talked to some top real estate experts in the country to get their take on things.
Okay, sounds like a good source. And speaking of navigating complex landscapes, I got to give a shout out to our partners at Open Media Group.
Yes.
They're one of the top production companies in the Middle East, especially in Egypt and Turkey.
Right. They're experts at navigating that region, and they do amazing work.
Yeah, I mean, they do it all: video production, website development, social media management. They know how to help businesses succeed in that market.
Absolutely. A great resource. Okay, so back to this article about the Turkish housing market. It starts by describing the market as being in a state of flux.
Flux, huh? That sounds a little ominous.
Yeah, and they point out that for the past 9 months, there have been real price declines.
Real price declines. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I think that's a good question to clarify because I think a lot of people see, prices going up in Turkish lira, and they think, oh, the market's doing great.
Right, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good time to buy, does it?
Not necessarily. So when we talk about real price decline, we're talking about prices adjusted for inflation.
Okay, so even though prices might be going up on paper, they're not actually keeping pace with the rising cost of everything else.
Exactly. So in real terms, your money isn't actually going as far. And that's a trend that's been catching the eye of a lot of economists and potential home buyers.
Yeah. It makes sense. If your money's losing value faster than housing prices are rising, you're not really coming out ahead.
Exactly. So the big question is now the time to buy, or should people wait and see what happens?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What does the article say about that?
Well, they interviewed 3 different prominent figures in the Turkish real estate scene to get their opinions. And the first one was Ahmet Büyükduman, who's a real estate economist.
Okay, so someone who really knows their stuff. What's his take?
Well, he's predicting that these real price declines will continue, but only in the medium term and only as long as interest rates remain high.
So those interest rates are a pretty big factor then.
Yeah, it seems like they're a big deal. He basically said that high interest rates make it harder for people to get mortgages.
Right, because mortgages become more expensive when interest rates are higher.
Exactly. And that can lower demand and put downward pressure on prices.
Okay, so if those interest rates were to go down, we could see things start to shift.
That's what he suggested, yeah. He even threw in a little caveat, though, saying that this whole thing could change in a couple months if inflation catches up to those price increases.
Okay, interesting. So it sounds like there's a little bit of a buy now while it's low kind of message there, but also a warning that things could change quickly.
Exactly. And then the second expert they talked to was Hakan Akduzan, who's from the Istanbul Chamber of Commerce.
So another perspective from someone who really knows the Turkish market.
Yeah, and he's actually forecasting the price decline to continue for a bit longer, all the way into early 2025.
Oh, wow. So he's a little more bearish than the first guy.
Yeah, but then he said things could get really interesting once interest rates are cut, which he also seems to think will happen.
I see. So he's thinking those rate cuts could bring investors flooding back into the market.
Yeah, he thinks that could boost demand and potentially push prices higher. So kind of a similar outlook in the long run, but with a longer period of price decline before things turn around.
Okay, so two experts, two slightly different timelines, but both pointing to interest rates as a major factor. What about the third expert?
Well, third guy they brought in was Ismail Uskan, the head of the Real Estate Professionals Association.
So this is someone who's really plugged into the day-to-day realities of the market. What did he have to say?
He seemed to agree that the decline wouldn't last too long, also mentioning those potential interest rate cuts as a turning point. But then he brought up something totally new.
Oh, what's that?
The rental market. He pointed out that Turkey's rental market is like super tight right now. Rents are sky high.
Wow, so it's like a double whammy for anyone looking for a place to live in Turkey right now. High purchase prices, A&D, high rents.
Yeah, it's tough. And he said that some people are actually choosing to buy property just to avoid those crazy rental costs.
I can see that. If you're going to be paying an arm and a leg for rent anyway, it might start to make more sense to just bite the bullet and buy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like this pressure from the rental market is spilling over into the buying market. And it all comes back to that broader economic context, right?
Mhm.
Inflation is affecting everything.
Right. Makes you wonder if there are any opportunities for businesses to, you know, jump in and provide solutions.
Ooh, good point. Speaking of opportunities, I think this is a good time to mention Open Media Group again.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
They really know the Middle Eastern market, whether you're launching a real estate business or any kind of business there.
Yeah, I can see their services being incredibly valuable in a market like that, especially with all the economic shifts happening.
Totally. Whether it's a killer website, a captivating video to promote your services, or a social media strategy that really connects with your target audience, Open Media Group can help.
And they have a strong presence in Turkey specifically, right?
Right, so they're really in tune with what's going on in that market. You can find them at https://openmediagroup.org or just click the link in our episode description.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got these expert opinions, which are really interesting, but is there any hard data to back up what they're saying?
Yeah, good question. The article does highlight some numbers from the Turkish Central Bank's Housing Price Index. For example, in October, there was a 2.1% month-on-month price increase.
Right.
But get this, a 14.7% decrease when adjusted for inflation.
Wait, hold on. How can prices go up and down at the same time?
I know, right? It sounds a little confusing. But it goes back to that concept of real price decline we were talking about earlier.
Ah, okay. So in nominal terms, prices did go up slightly, but when you factor in how much the lira has lost value, the real value of those prices actually went down.
You got it.
So it's kind of like a hidden decline in a way.
Yeah, it's not as obvious if you're just looking at the raw numbers, but the
Ah.
real story is that, adjusted for inflation, prices have been declining for 9 months straight.
Wow, 9 months. That's a pretty significant streak.
Yeah, it definitely suggests that something is shifting in the market. But is it a red flag? You know? Like, is this a sign that things are about to go south? Or is it just a temporary blip? What do you think?
That's a tough one. I mean, it definitely suggests that the dynamics are changing, but we need to look at the bigger picture to really understand what's going on. We need to see how those long-term trends are playing out and what other factors might be influencing them.
Okay, so expert opinions are helpful for understanding the context, but we shouldn't jump to conclusions based on just a few data points.
Exactly. It's like trying to solve a puzzle, you know? The more pieces we have, the clearer the picture becomes.
I like that analogy. So what other pieces of the puzzle do we need to look at?
Well, remember that part about the declining construction permits in Turkey?
Oh, yeah. That was towards the end of the article. I have to admit, I kind of skimmed over that part.
Well, I think it's actually pretty important
Mhm.
because declining construction permits can have a big impact on housing prices in the long run.
Oh, really? How so?
Think about it. Fewer permits mean fewer new homes being built, right?
Right.
And if demand stays high, especially if those interest rates drop like the experts are predicting, well, a limited supply of new housing could push prices up.
Ah, I see. So even if we're seeing price drops now, that might not last forever if there's not enough new construction to keep up with demand.
Exactly. It's a classic case of supply and demand.
So we're kind of looking at two different timelines here. Short term, we're seeing these price drops, but long term, things could swing in the other direction.
That's a great way to put it. It's all about taking a holistic view, considering both the immediate trends and the potential long-term implications. And it highlights the importance of digging deeper, not just looking at the surface level stuff.
Absolutely. So this construction slowdown, is it just a temporary blip or a sign of something more serious? Like, what's driving this decline in permits in the first place? Is that something they addressed in the article?
That's a really good question, and it brings us back to the importance of understanding the broader economic and political context.
Right, because those factors can definitely influence the real estate market.
Absolutely. There could be several things at play here. Maybe construction costs have gone up, making it less profitable for developers to build. Or there could be government policies, regulatory hurdles that are impacting the construction industry.
So it's not just about crunching numbers and analyzing data. It's about understanding those bigger forces that are shaping these trends.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so interesting because those forces can shift and change over time. What might be impacting the market today could be totally different a year or two from now.
It sounds like trying to predict the Turkish housing market is a bit like trying to predict the weather. So many variables.
Yeah, it can definitely feel that way sometimes. But even with all the uncertainty, there are ways to make more informed decisions. It's about understanding the risks and rewards, staying up to date on the latest information, and being prepared to adjust your strategy as things change.
Which, if I may add, sounds a lot like the advice you'd give to a business trying to navigate the ever-changing landscape of the Middle East.
Huh, you got that right. And speaking of which, let's give another shout out to Open Media Group.
Yes, they are the experts in helping businesses communicate effectively in that region.
They can help you create a brand that really connects with your target audience. Whether you need help with video production, website development, or social media management, they've got you covered.
They really do it all. If you're thinking about expanding your business into the Middle East, check out Open Media Group. You can find them at https://openmediagroup.org, or just click the link in our episode description.
Definitely worth a look.
Okay, so back to Turkey. We've talked about expert opinions, we've looked at some data points, and we've even touched on those underlying trends, like the construction permit situation. I'm starting to feel like we've got a pretty good grasp of the market, but what stands out to you as the most significant takeaway so far?
Good question. I think what's most striking is that even with these real price declines, there are a few factors that could really shift the balance in the future.
Like those potential interest rate cuts we've been talking about.
Exactly. Those could really reignite investor demand and push prices back up.
And on the supply side, we've got that slowdown in construction permits, which could lead to a shortage down the line.
Right. So even if you see lower prices now, don't assume that will be the case forever. There are these long-term factors at play that could change everything.
Okay, so even though prices are down right now might actually be a good time to buy if you're in it for the long haul.
It's definitely a possibility worth considering. But as always, it's crucial to do your own research, understand your personal financial situation, and weigh the risks and rewards carefully.
Right, no such thing as a guaranteed return in real estate.
Exactly. But understanding the market dynamics can definitely help you make smarter decisions.
It's like having a roadmap instead of just wandering around blindly.
Exactly. But even with a roadmap, there can be unexpected detours. We've seen how quickly things can change in this market.
Oh yeah, for sure. Speaking of unexpected detours, I just remembered the article did mention one more interesting detail. A lot of these price drops are happening specifically in the secondhand market.
Oh, interesting. What do you make of that?
Yeah, that does make you wonder if something specific is happening in that segment of the market.
It does raise some questions like, are sellers in that market maybe feeling more pressure?
To offload their properties, you mean?
Yeah. Maybe they're more worried about the future?
Because of the economic uncertainty.
Right. Or maybe they've got financial concerns and they just need to sell quickly.
So they're willing to lower prices just to get a deal done fast.
Yeah, maybe. And from the buyer's side, it could be that people are a little hesitant about new developments.
Yeah, because those can be pricier.
And riskier, too.
Right, who knows what could happen during construction or if the project even gets finished on time.
So, in uncertain times, secondhand properties might seem like a safer bet.
Makes sense. But okay, after all this, we still haven't really answered our original question. Is now a good time to buy in Turkey? I mean, we've talked about so much, it's hard to keep it all straight. Expert opinions, data analysis, construction trends, the rental market.
You're right, it is a lot to take in. And at the end of the day, it's a personal decision. It all depends on your own situation.
Like your financial goals.
Yeah, and your risk tolerance, too.
Some people are more comfortable with risk than others.
For sure. But I think we can give our listeners a few key takeaways to think about.
Yeah, that's a good idea. What are the most important things for people to remember?
The first thing is that this market is definitely in flux. Real prices have been going down, but that could change, especially if those interest rate cuts happen.
And so people should definitely keep an eye on those interest rates.
Absolutely. They're a big clue about what might happen next. And then the other thing to remember is that construction slowdown we were talking about, that could lead to a shortage of housing in the future, which could push prices back up.
So even if you see a good deal right now, you can't assume it'll stay that way forever.
Yeah, the long-term factors are really important to consider. And one last thing, always do your own research. Talk to local experts, financial advisors. Really dig deep into the specific market you're interested in.
Right, don't just rely on what you read online or hear from us.
Exactly.
Awesome advice. Well, I got to say, this has been a really insightful deep dive. Big thanks to Open Media Group for partnering with us on this one.
Yeah, they're a fantastic resource for anyone looking to do business in the Middle East.
I highly recommend checking them out. Their website is https://openmediagroup.org, or you can just click the link in our episode description.
Easy peasy.
So we started with this question: is now a good time to buy in Turkey? And it turns out the answer is way more complicated than just a yes or no.
Yeah, this market is full of twists and turns.
But I think we did a good job of, untangling some of those complexities.
I hope so. It's always fascinating to really dig into these topics and see what's really going on beneath the surface.
So to sum it all up, the Turkish housing market is dynamic, it's complex, and there might be some good opportunities out there. But you got to be careful, stay informed, do your research.
Words to live by, especially when it comes to real estate.
And hey, maybe with a little help from Open Media Group, you could be the next big success story in the Middle East. Who knows?
Possibilities are endless.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. If you have any questions about the Turkish housing market or anything else we've talked about today, hit us up on social media. We'd love to hear from you.
Definitely. Let's keep this conversation going. And until next time, happy investing.
It does kind of make you wonder what's going on there. Like, is it just a coincidence?
Yeah, is there something else driving that trend? It could be that sellers in the secondhand market are, well, I don't know, maybe they're just feeling more pressure to sell.
More pressure than, say, developers of brand new properties.
Maybe. Like they need to get rid of those properties quickly,
Because of the economic uncertainty? Or like just personal financial stuff?
Could be. And for buyers, it might be that secondhand just feels like a safer bet right now.
Yeah, especially with new developments, you never know. Construction delays, cost overruns.
Right, exactly.
Secondhand, at least you know what you're getting.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, okay, back to our original question. After all this, is now the time to buy in Turkey?
Well, I think we've seen that it's not a simple answer.
Definitely not. There's a lot to consider. The expert opinions, the data, the construction trends, that crazy rental market.
It all adds up to a pretty complex picture. In the end, it really comes down to each individual buyer, their circumstances,
Their goals, their risk tolerance, all that.
Exactly. But we can at least give our listeners a few key takeaways to think about.
That's a good idea. What are the most important things to keep in mind?
Well, first off, remember, this market is changing. Things are in flux. We've seen those real price declines, but they might not last forever.
Especially if those interest rates drop, like
Right.
the experts are predicting.
Exactly. So that's something to watch closely. And then there's that construction slowdown, too.
Right, which
Yeah.
could lead to higher prices down the line.
If there aren't enough new homes being built to meet demand.
So even if prices look tempting right now, don't assume they'll stay that way.
Exactly. And one last thing, always do your own research. Talk to people, dig into the details. Don't just rely on what you read online or hear on a podcast.
Solid advice. Talk to local experts, maybe a financial advisor, get the real scoop. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. Huge thanks to our partners at Open Media Group for helping us make sense of all this.
They really are a great resource for anyone looking to navigate the Middle Eastern market.
Absolutely. If you're thinking about doing business in that region, check them out. Their website is https://openmediagroup.org, or you can just click the link in our episode description. And to all our listeners, if you have any questions about the Turkish housing market or anything else we talked about today, you know where to find us.
Hit us up on social media. We love hearing from you guys.
We started with this question: is now a good time to buy in Turkey? And as we've seen, there's no easy answer.
There are definitely pros and cons to consider.
But hopefully, we've given you the information you need to make an informed decision.
That's what we aim for, to empower our listeners with knowledge.
So the Turkish housing market,
Mm-hmm.
it's dynamic, it's complex, it can be risky, but it might also be full of opportunities.
Especially if you know what to look for.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So stay informed, do your research, and who knows, you might just find your dream property in Turkey.
And maybe even make a killing in the process.
Hey, you never know. All right, everyone, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. Until next time, happy investing.